At her own 30th birthday party in front of 30 of her friends, my fiancée called me a worthless loser because I fix air conditioners for a living. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I just looked at her calmly and said, "You're absolutely right." Then I walked out and immediately started the process of becoming exactly what she ordered, her loser. Now her carefully crafted life is in ruins, and my real one has just begun. To understand what happened at that party, you have to understand the 4 years that led up to it. You have to understand the foundation upon which our life was supposedly built, or more accurately, the foundation that I built, and that she merely decorated. My name is Brian. I'm 36 years old. For a living, I fix what's broken. I'm an HVAC technician, heating, ventilation, air conditioning. It's honest work. It pays well. It requires skill and logic. When someone's air conditioner dies in the middle of a heat wave, I'm the one they call. I solve problems. That's who I am. My fiancée Natalie was 34. She worked in marketing for a cosmetics company. Her job wasn't about fixing things that were broken, but about creating an image of perfection that didn't exist. Brand image networking opportunities, social currency. These were the words she lived by. To her, perception wasn't just a part of reality. It was the only reality that mattered. We had been together for 4 years, living together for 2. The apartment was technically my place. My name was the only one on the lease. I paid the rent every month on time. I paid the utilities. I paid for the internet she used to build her online persona. There was also the matter of her car, a leased BMW that cost more per month than my first truck. I paid for that too. She said it was an investment in her career. "You have to look successful to be successful, Brian," she'd say. I didn't argue. I just paid the bill. Her salary, she explained, was for her personal brand development. That meant clothes trips with her friends, brunches that cost hundreds of dollars, and an endless supply of the very cosmetics her company sold. Our finances were separate in theory, but completely merged in practice. My income was our income. Her income was her income. It was a subtle imbalance that over time became a chasm. The birthday party was the perfect example. It was her 30th, a major milestone in her world. She wanted an intimate gathering at our place. That intimate gathering quickly ballooned to 30 people. Her work friends, her college friends, and a few minor social media influencers she was desperate to impress. I spent the entire Saturday setting up. I hired a bartender. I ordered catering from a place she'd bookmarked on Instagram. I bought the decorations. I spent over $3,000 to create the perfect backdrop for her perfect night. And for a few hours it was. She floated through the room, glass of expensive wine in hand, accepting compliments on her beautiful apartment and her wonderful party. I stayed in the background, making sure the ice bucket was full and the music was at the right level. I was the stagehand for her one-woman show. I was used to it. But looking back, the signs were always there. The little cuts, the subtle dismissals. They were like hairline fractures in a foundation invisible until the whole structure gives way. There was the time a year ago at her company's Christmas party. She introduced me to her boss, not as her fiancé, but as my friend Brian. He's incredibly good with his hands. There were the constant comparisons, always framed as gentle suggestions. Kelly's husband just got promoted to senior director, she'd mentioned casually. He works in tech sales. "You'd be so good at that, Brian. You're great with people." What she meant was, "Your job title isn't impressive enough for me to repeat at brunch." There was the red flag about my friends. My best friend Trevor, who I've known since we were kids, was a bit rough around the edges for her crowd. My friends who would help you move a couch at a moment's notice were my loser friends because they drank beer and played video games instead of networking. I ignored them all. I told myself this was just how relationships worked. Compromise. Support. I thought I was being a supportive partner by funding the life she wanted. I didn't realize I was just an investor in an illusion, and the return on that investment was contempt. The final crack in the foundation appeared about 10 o'clock that night. I was in the kitchen when I heard her friend Megan ask about our vacation plans for the summer. Natalie let out a theatrical sigh. "Oh, we're not going anywhere," she said, her voice loud enough to carry. "Brian can't really afford it right now." I walked out of the kitchen. I didn't raise my voice. I just stated a fact. "Actually," I said, looking at Natalie, "I suggested we go camping at the state park for a long weekend. You said you wanted carbo." She rolled her eyes, a performance for her friends. Camping? Seriously, Brian. That's your idea of a vacation. Her friends giggled. It was the giggle of people who had never had to worry about a car repair or a sudden medical bill. It was the sound of casual cruelty. I should have walked away. But 4 years of suppressed frustration came out in one quiet, logical sentence. I said, "It's what we can afford if you want to keep your BMW lease." And that's when she snapped. That's when the 4 years of illusion came crashing down. I spent that night on my buddy Trevor's couch. He didn't ask questions. He just handed me a beer and went to get some blankets. That's real friendship. It's not about grand gestures. It's about quiet support. I woke up Sunday morning to a dead phone. When I plugged it in, it came alive with the digital equivalent of a seizure. 62 missed calls. A tsunami of text messages from Natalie. At first, they were what you'd expect. The panicked apologies. "Baby, come home. I was drunk. I didn't mean any of it." Then came the pleas. "We need to talk. 4 years, Brian, don't throw this away over one bad night." When that didn't work, the narrative shifted. The apologies turned into accusations. "You can't just leave me. You abandoned me at my own party. You humiliated me." Then came the final stage manipulation. "Everyone thinks you're abusive now. My friends are all so worried about me. You need help, Brian. You're clearly unstable." I watched the messages scroll by, a complete cycle of narcissistic tactics playing out in real time. It was fascinating in a clinical sort of way. I saw the entire 4 years of our relationship for what it was. A transaction where I provided stability, and she provided the illusion of a happy couple. I let her exhaust herself. Then I sent a single text back. I wrote, "I am working on being a worthless loser. Your things will be packed by Friday. Get them by Sunday, or they will be donated to Goodwill." Her call came instantly. I didn't answer. I just silenced my phone. The next morning I didn't go to work. Instead, I did something I had been putting off for 2 years, because Natalie always said it was too risky and not the right time. What she meant was it wasn't a glamorous enough story for her to tell her friends. On Monday, I went to the city clerk's office and filed the paperwork for my business license. On Tuesday, I registered my LLC online. BT Climate Control. The BT stands for Better Than But Only Trevor Knows That. Then I went to the bank and opened a business account. By Wednesday, I had designed a simple logo and ordered business cards. That afternoon, I called 10 old clients who had asked me in the past if I did side work. 4 of them booked me for a job on the spot. I was no longer just a technician. I was a business owner. On Thursday, Natalie showed up at Trevor's apartment. She must have seen my car. She ambushed me as I was walking up to the door. She said, "Brian, please. We need to talk about this." I said, "No, we don't." She tried a different tactic, the one that always used to work. Tears. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I was just showing off for those people. You know how they are. It didn't mean anything." I looked at her. The tears didn't have the same effect anymore. I said, "Yeah, I do know how they are now, and I know who you are." Her face hardened. The tears stopped as quickly as they started. 4 years, Brian. You're really throwing away 4 years over one argument." I said, "No. I'm walking away from 4 years of you being ashamed of me." "I was never ashamed," she insisted. "I just wanted more for us." "For you," I corrected her. "You wanted more for you." She saw she was losing, so she played her final card. Entitlement. "Fine," she snapped. "But you can't just kick me out of the apartment. I have rights." I had been waiting for this. I had spent Sunday afternoon not just nursing a hangover, but researching tenancy laws in our state. A small, useful detail. I said, "What writes your name isn't on the lease?" She said, "I've lived there for 2 years. That gives me rights." I shook my head. "You've lived there for 2 years as my guest. You've never paid rent. You've never paid a single utility bill. Legally, you have no claim." I checked. The color drained from her face. She looked at me as if she was seeing a stranger. Maybe she was. The man who had enabled her for 4 years was gone. In his place was a man who knew his rights. "Your things are in boxes by the door," I said, my voice even. "Our neighbor Brittany has the key. Be out by Sunday." Then I walked past her, went into Trevor's apartment and closed the door. I didn't look back. The first move had been made. It was her turn to play. That weekend was interesting. Natalie didn't come alone to pick up her things on Saturday. She brought reinforcements. An emotional support army consisting of her mother Diane and her two best friends, the infamous Megan and Kelly. I assumed the plan was to collect her boxes and stage a last-ditch intervention. I was in the middle of packing up her extensive collection of scented candles when the knock came. I opened the door to see the four of them standing there with grim, determined faces. Diane, her mother, spoke first. She said, "Brian, this has gone on long enough. This is ridiculous. Couples fight. You don't end a 4-year relationship over one argument." I leaned against the doorframe. I said, "With all due respect, Diane, that wasn't an argument. An argument implies a discussion between two people. That was a public sentencing, and I was just there to hear the verdict." Megan, the surgeon's girlfriend, chimed in, her voice dripping with condescension. "You're being incredibly immature about this, Brian. Natalie was drunk. She loves you. She deserves better than to be thrown out onto the street." I almost laughed. "You're right," I said, looking directly at Megan. "She does deserve better than a worthless loser. I'm just giving her the opportunity to find it. As for being thrown out, she has a key. She's here to collect her things as we agreed." Kelly, the quiet one, decided to add her 2 cents. "She's just devastated, Brian. Her heart is broken." I nodded slowly. "I understand. Mine was too for a while. But then it was replaced by something much clearer: respect for myself." They stood there stumped. They had come expecting a screaming match, tears, drama. They had prepared for a fight. They had no strategy for dealing with calm logic. While her friends awkwardly helped carry boxes to her car, Natalie supervised, making sure to loudly point out everything I was stealing from her. She said, "That's my espresso machine." I said, "The one you bought with my credit card." "Sure, take it." She said, "And the television is mine. We bought it together." I said, "Here's the receipt from Best Buy. My name, my card. It's an interesting legal theory you have, though." She was getting desperate. As they were carrying the last of her things out, she played her final card. The one she thought was a guaranteed checkmate. She stood in the doorway, looked at her mother and friends for support, and then looked at me, her eyes welling up with tears. She announced loud enough for the neighbors to hear, "I'm pregnant." Everyone froze. Her own mother looked shocked. Megan and Kelly exchanged a wide-eyed glance. The air in the room went still. This was it. The ultimate trap. The inescapable emotional blackmail. I let the silence hang there for a moment. I didn't panic. I didn't yell. I just waited. Then I looked at her, my voice perfectly calm, and I said, "No, you're not." Her fake tears stopped. "How would you know?" she stammered. I took a slow breath. I said, "Because you had your period last week. I bought the tampons for you, myself, remember? Unless you're claiming some kind of immaculate conception, the math just doesn't work." Her friends started looking at their feet. Her mother wouldn't meet my eyes. "Also," I continued, my voice dropping a little lower, a little slower, "you might want to check your calendar. You were at that marketing conference in Miami 3 weeks ago. Remember? The one you said was so important for your career." Her face went from pale to completely white. She knew exactly what I was talking about. And from the looks on their faces, her friends were starting to put the pieces together too. I wasn't just guessing. I knew about Miami. I knew who she had shared a hotel room with. But she didn't need to know that. All I needed was for her to know that I knew. The storm had backfired. The reinforcements were in retreat. And the game had just entered a whole new level. After the failed pregnancy gambit, I expected Natalie to retreat, to lick her wounds. I underestimated her. When you take away a narcissist's sense of control, they don't retreat. They escalate. The real games began on Monday. Natalie took the fight to her home turf social media. She posted a long, tearful story on every platform. It was a masterpiece of victimhood. She wrote, "After 4 years of unconditional support, he abandoned me out of nowhere. No explanation, no conversation. He just threw me out of my home. Ladies, this is what happens when you date down. They grow to resent your success and punish you for their own inadequacy. My heart is shattered, but my spirit will not be broken." The comments were split at first. Half were her friends offering generic support. "You're so strong, his loss, Queen." The other half were people who smelled something wasn't right. But the narrative was hers. I was the villain. But then something beautiful happened. Something Natalie in her self-obsessed world had completely forgotten about. The 30 people at the party. And their phones. By Tuesday, the first clip surfaced. It wasn't the whole thing, just the critical 30 seconds. There was Natalie, wineglass in hand, her face twisted in rage, spitting the words, "You are such a worthless loser." Then it showed her continuing her tirade, calling me a glorified maintenance man. And then there was me, just standing there, not saying a word. The video ended with me quietly saying, "You're right," and walking away. And this is where I want to talk about the power of walking away. In a world that rewards loud arguments and dramatic reactions, silence is a strategic weapon. When someone is screaming at you, they are trying to transfer their chaos onto you. They want you to scream back. They want a fight, because a fight between two people implies that both sides might have a point. By refusing to engage, by simply absorbing the blow and leaving with dignity, you don't give their anger a target. It has nowhere to go but back on itself. My silence didn't prove my weakness. It proved her toxicity. I didn't need to defend myself. Her own words convicted her. The narrative flipped instantly. The court of public opinion had reached its verdict. Her friend Kelly, the restaurant owner's wife, was the first to break ranks. She commented, "Natalie, we all saw what happened. This is not the truth. He handled that with class." Another party guest wrote, "You humiliated him in front of everyone because he suggested camping instead of carbo. This post is gaslighting, pure and simple." But the best comment, the one that went viral, came from some random guy named Derek, who wasn't even there. He wrote, "Imagine being called worthless by someone who drives a leased BMW she can't afford while living rent-free in his apartment. The audacity." That comment got thousands of likes. She deleted the original post, of course. But the internet never forgets. The screenshots were already everywhere. The videos were being re-uploaded faster than she could report them. She had started a war with a narrative she crafted and lost to a truth she had created. The fallout from the social media explosion was swift and brutal. Karma, it turns out, has excellent bandwidth. On Monday, I got a call. It was from a woman in the human resources department at Natalie's cosmetics company. She sounded professional but cautious. She said, "Mr. Richards, we're conducting an internal review regarding an incident involving one of our employees, Natalie." I said, "I'm listening." She continued, "Several videos have been forwarded to us that appear to show Miss Peters in a compromising situation at a private party. We were hoping you could provide some context." I chose my words carefully. "I have no comment on what was a private and painful matter," I said. "However, if you need the original unedited video files for your internal records, I would be willing to provide them. I believe they will give you all the context you need." There was a pause on the other end. Then she said, "Thank you, Mr. Richards. That would be very helpful." I emailed her the files. I didn't have to add any commentary. The videos spoke for themselves. They showed one of their marketing managers, who was supposed to represent their inclusive and empowering brand, drunkenly berating me for being working class. Not a good look. By Wednesday, I heard through the grapevine that she had been fired. The official reason was conduct unbecoming of a company representative. The dominoes fell quickly after that. No job meant no income. No income meant she couldn't make the lease payment on her BMW. By the end of the week, the car was gone, repossessed. Her primary symbol of status, the one she had shamed me for not being able to afford, was towed away from her mother's curb. And that was the final humiliation. She had to move back in with her mom into her childhood bedroom, surrounded by posters of boy bands and forgotten dreams. The independent, successful marketing guru she pretended to be online was now 34 years old and living with her parents. But her collapse wasn't just about losing a job or a car. It was faster and more complete than that. To understand why her entire world evaporated overnight, you have to understand the concept of social capital. Sociologists talk about two kinds of social capital. The first is called bonding capital. This is the deep stuff. These are the bonds forged in trust and mutual support. These are the friends who will help you move, who will sit with you in silence after a bad day. My friend Trevor, he's my bonding capital. The second kind is called bridging capital. This is the network. These are the weaker, more transactional ties. Your colleagues, your acquaintances, your followers online. They're not your friends, they're your contacts. They are useful for getting ahead, for building an image, for creating the perception of importance. Natalie's entire social universe was built on bridging capital. Her friends like Megan and Kelly were not friends in the true sense. They were status allies. They were connected to the lifestyle. She projected a lifestyle of expensive brunches, designer clothes, and European vacations. But here's the critical detail she overlooked. I was the silent, uncredited financial backer of that entire lifestyle. The apartment was the stage. The BMW was the primary prop. The parties I paid for were the networking events. I was the invisible foundation for her fragile house of cards. When I walked out that door, I didn't just remove myself. I removed the foundation. Her friends weren't loyal to her. They were loyal to the access and status that her lifestyle provided them. And that lifestyle was funded by me. Once the money and the image were gone, so was the bridging capital. Her network wasn't a safety net. It was a collection of spectators. And when the show was over, they all went home. She hadn't built a community. She had only built an audience. And the audience had gotten bored. It's funny how two lives once intertwined can diverge so completely. While Natalie's world was imploding, mine was quietly being built brick by brick. My company, BT Climate Control, started getting calls. It began with the most ironic twist of all. I got a message from Megan, the surgeon's girlfriend, the one who had called me immature. She said, "Hey Brian, you probably have every reason to hate me, but I wanted to apologize. And also, my boyfriend's practice needs a new HVAC system installed. Are you interested?" That one job born from the ashes of that disastrous party was enough to cover 3 months of my expenses, and it was a showcase. The surgeon was so impressed with the work, the professionalism, the fact that I showed up on time and cleaned up after myself, that he recommended me to 2 other doctors in his building. They hired me. One of them was on the board of a law firm downtown. They needed their entire office system overhauled. I got that job too. Turns out being a worthless loser who actually does quality work is a pretty good business model. My reputation grew through word of mouth the old-fashioned way. No Instagram posts, no networking events, just competence. And with every new client, a little bit more of the old weight lifted. I came home to an apartment that was finally my own. I took down all of her generic live, laugh, love decorations. I bought a comfortable couch that didn't look like it belonged in a museum. I started sleeping through the night for the first time in years. I lost 10 pounds probably, from no longer eating her toxic fancy dinners. I found a quiet that I didn't even know I had been missing. Meanwhile, from what I heard through the grapevine, Natalie's world was anything but quiet. She had fully committed to becoming a lifestyle influencer. Her Instagram, which once featured glamorous trips and sponsored posts, now featured tearful videos filmed in her childhood bedroom. She posted a long apology video, but people saw it for what it was, a performance. The comments were brutal. "Is this another marketing campaign?" one person wrote. "This apology is sponsored by Crocodile Tears," said another. Her follower count was stuck at 847. She was trying to sell an image of a life she no longer had, and no one was buying it. The most surreal moment came about a month after the party. I got a call from an unknown number. It was Diane, Natalie's mom. I almost didn't answer. She said, "Brian, I owe you an apology." I wasn't expecting that. She continued, her voice heavy. "Natalie finally told me the truth. About the party, about Miami, about everything. About how you paid for everything while she spent her money on herself. I thought I raised her better than that. I'm so sorry." This was the third-party validation, the final piece of closure I didn't even know I needed. It wasn't about being right. It was about being seen. I said, "It is what it is, Diane." She sighed. I kicked her out. She's staying with some friend from high school working at a makeup counter at the mall, still acting like the victim. She paused, then said, "You're a good man, Brian. You deserved better. I just wanted you to know that her own mother sees that now." I thanked her and hung up. It felt like the closing of a book. The ultimate poetic justice came last weekend. I was at a steakhouse celebrating a new contract when I ran into Kelly and her husband, the restaurant owner. They insisted I join them. Her husband shook my hand firmly. "Heard about your business taking off," he said. "Respect. Starting from scratch takes balls." Kelly smiled. "We all knew Natalie was high maintenance, but we didn't know she was that cruel. You handled it perfectly." I just shrugged. "I just did what she told me to do," I said. "Stop being her loser." They laughed. And we actually became friends. Funny how that works. I never tried to impress them. I never networked. I just existed, and that was enough. By losing her world, I had accidentally inherited the best parts of it, cleansed of all the toxicity. My world was getting bigger and brighter, built on the solid ground of my own hard work. Hers was shrinking, confined to the 4-inch screen of a phone, a ghost haunting the life she had thrown away. It's been 2 months since the party. 2 months since the chains snapped. My business is thriving. I just bought a new truck for the company. Paid in cash. Last week I hired my first employee, a kid straight out of trade school. He's eager, hard-working, and reminds me of myself before I let someone convince me I wasn't enough. I saw Natalie yesterday. I was at a gas station filling up the new truck. She pulled in on the other side of the pump, driving a beat-up early 2000s Honda Civic with a spiderweb crack in the windshield. She didn't see me at first. She got out of her car looking tired. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by a simple work uniform from the mall. Then she looked up and saw me. Recognition flickered in her eyes. She started to take a step forward, a word forming on her lips, but then her gaze drifted past me to the side of my truck. She saw the logo, BT Climate Control, and underneath it the slogan, "We fix what's broken." She stopped. She didn't say a word. She just looked at the logo, then back at me, and I saw something shift in her face. Not anger, not sadness, just a quiet, final understanding. She turned around, got back in her car and drove away. Trevor asked me the other night if I regretted any of it, if I ever missed her or the life we had. I told him no. She was right about one thing. I was a worthless loser. I was worth less to her than her image. I was losing her respect because my job title wasn't something she could brag about at dinner parties. I had ambition, just not the kind you can post on Instagram. My ambition was to build things that last, to do good work, to be a man of my word. She never understood that. And that brings me to the echo. My business is a success, the contracts keep coming in. By all external measures, I've won. But there are nights when the house is quiet and the work is done that I can still hear her voice in my head, whispering those words, worthless loser. The victory doesn't completely erase the wound. It doesn't silence the echo. But the echo has changed. It's no longer a judgment. It's a reminder of what happens when you outsource your self-worth to someone else. It's the sound of a lesson learned in the harshest way possible. It's no longer a brand on my soul. It's the fuel that keeps me building. This story has a satisfying ending because I ended up successful. But let's imagine a different timeline for a second. What if after I left, my business struggled? What if I had to fight for every client and barely scraped by for years? Would my decision to leave still have been the right one? The answer is yes. Absolutely yes. We have a tendency to judge our decisions based on their outcomes. It's called outcome bias. But the real value of what I did that night wasn't in the business I built afterward. It was in the single moment I chose self-respect over a toxic peace. The success of walking away isn't measured by a bank account. It's measured by the quiet dignity you reclaim for yourself. The thriving business is just the bonus. The real victory happened the second I walked out that door. I was no longer her loser. And in doing so, I became my own man. That is a victory that no one can ever take away.